I never thought something as simple as fixing targets on a dusty old shooting range would pull me into a storm that would change my life. It started as just another Sunday morning, the kind where the air felt heavy with silence, the sun climbing lazily over the horizon, and my only responsibility was carrying a box of cardboard cutouts to pin on the wooden frames. The range was quiet, abandoned for the most part, a forgotten place tucked behind dry fields where only a few enthusiasts came to shoot. For me, it was more of a chore than a passion. My uncle had volunteered me to help out, claiming I needed to learn discipline, patience, and focus. Truth was, I didn't care much about guns. I wasn't a hunter, nor a soldier, nor one of those people obsessed with firearms. I was just there to fix the damn targets and go home. That morning, though, felt strange from the very beginning. As I walked down the line of frames, hammer in one hand and a handful of nails in the other, I noticed the silence wasn't the ordinary kind. It was deeper, like the whole field was holding its breath. Even the birds that usually perched on the wires above the range weren't there. My boots crunched on the gravel, each step echoing more loudly than usual. I brushed it off, telling myself I was being paranoid, maybe still half asleep. I set the first target, tapping the nails into place, the paper rattling against the wind. Then I heard it, not the whistle of the wind, not the buzzing of an insect, but the sharp metallic sound of a rifle bolt being pulled back. I froze. My first thought was that one of the members of the club had shown up early to practice, and I was standing stupidly in the line of fire. My uncle had warned me never to trust that everyone followed safety rules. Slowly, cautiously, I turned my head. The sun was glaring into my eyes, so I squinted, shading my face with one hand, searching for the silhouette. That's when I saw him. At the far end of the range, where the benches and sandbags were set up, a man sat with a rifle resting on the table. He wasn't one of the regulars. His posture wasn't casual like a hobbyist, it was tight, precise, focused. His clothes were simple, dark jacket, jeans, boots, but his hands moved like they belonged to someone who'd done this many times before. He wasn't here for practice. He was here for something else, something deliberate. And his rifle wasn't pointed at a target downrange. It was angled just enough for me to realize I was standing directly in his scope. My chest tightened. Instinct told me to duck, but another part of me, some stubborn and reckless instinct, told me to stand still. If he wanted me gone, he could have pulled the trigger already. The fact that he hadn't meant something. Maybe he was testing me. Maybe he wanted me to see him. Either way, my hands trembled as I forced myself to hammer the last nail into the target frame, pretending like nothing was wrong, though every nerve in my body screamed that everything was very wrong. The moment stretched unbearably long. Then, without warning, he lifted his rifle off the stand, slung it across his shoulder, and began walking toward me. My legs screamed to run, but I stayed rooted, watching him close the distance. With every step, the shape of his face grew clearer. He wasn't old, maybe mid-30s, sharp features, eyes that didn't blink much. There was no friendliness in them, no casual curiosity. When he finally stopped a few feet away, the rifle still resting against his shoulder, he spoke in a voice that was calm but carried weight, like every word had been chosen carefully. You don't belong here. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, cold and certain. My mouth went dry, but I forced myself to answer. I'm just fixing targets. That's all. His eyes narrowed slightly, studying me as though searching for a crack in my story. Whose orders? My uncle's, I said quickly. He runs maintenance for the club. A pause. His gaze softened just enough to show he was processing, calculating. Then he nodded once, almost to himself, before muttering, "Bad place for you to be today." My skin prickled. Why? I asked, though I regretted it the second the word slipped out. Instead of answering, he looked past me, toward the stretch of empty road leading into the range. Dust had started to rise in the distance, a car approaching. His jaw clenched. Without another word, he turned and gripped my shoulder firmly, not painfully but with enough force to make clear he could control the situation if he wanted. You didn't see me, he said. His voice was low but unshakable, like stone. You never saw me. Before I could reply, he moved fast, slipping into the tall grass off the side of the range. Within seconds, he was gone, swallowed by the field as if he'd never been there. The only proof of his presence was the fading crunch of boots in the distance and the cold sweat dripping down my back. Then the car arrived, an old black sedan with tinted windows. Two men stepped out, dressed sharper than the stranger, more polished, like businessmen, but their movements betrayed them. They were searching, scanning, restless. One of them looked at me, his expression polite but stiff, like he was wearing a mask. "You see anyone here?" he asked. I hesitated. My heart thumped against my ribs, and for a moment, I considered telling them everything. The stranger's warning echoed in my ears. I shook my head. "No. Just me. Fixing targets." The man studied me for a few long seconds, then nodded. "All right. Carry on." They got back into the car, but they didn't leave. Instead, they parked under the shade of a tree, watching, waiting. And as I stood there, hammer still in my hand, my mind replayed the image of that rifle, that stare, and that single phrase, "You don't belong here." Little did I know, he was right. That morning wasn't about fixing targets. That morning was the beginning of something that would drag me into a world I had no business entering, a world of rifles, secrets, and choices that would leave me questioning every truth I thought I knew. The two men didn't leave. Their sedan idled under the crooked tree, its engine rumbling softly, but their attention stayed fixed on the range. I tried to act normal, hammering the rest of the targets into place, but every swing felt heavy, unnatural, like my arm belonged to someone else. My thoughts kept bouncing between the stranger who had vanished into the grass and the sharp-eyed men in the car. I wasn't sure who frightened me more. When I finished the last frame, I stuffed the hammer back into the toolbox and stood there, pretending to admire the neat line of targets. My gut told me the moment I walked away, they'd start asking questions again. Sure enough, one of them stepped out of the car and sauntered toward me. His suit was crisp, but the heat was making his forehead shine. He stopped a few feet away, sliding his sunglasses down his nose to meet my eyes. "You're certain no one else came by?" His tone wasn't casual this time. It carried a weight, the kind of pressure that demanded honesty. I swallowed hard. "I've been here all morning. Just me and the nails." He studied me for a long moment. Then, with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes, he said, "Good. Stay that way." He turned back toward the car, but not before I noticed the bulge beneath his jacket, a shoulder holster, the kind you only see in movies or on cops. Except I was almost sure these men weren't cops. When he got back inside, I picked up the empty box and toolbox and began walking toward the storage shed near the edge of the range. My legs moved faster than usual, not quite running, but my nerves were buzzing. I ducked inside the shed, shut the door behind me, and leaned against it, trying to catch my breath. The smell of oil, old wood, and dust filled the small space. My hands shook as I wiped the sweat from my forehead. What the hell was happening? I crouched near the window, peering out just enough to see them. The men weren't leaving. They seemed to be waiting for something, or someone. My chest tightened as I thought about the stranger. He'd slipped into the grass like a ghost, and if these guys were hunting him, then I had just lied for him. My uncle always told me not to stick my nose into business that wasn't mine, but somehow I'd already done it. Minutes dragged like hours. Then, faintly, I heard movement, the sound of boots brushing against dry weeds behind the shed. I froze, straining my ears. A shadow passed across the small window, and before I could react, the door creaked open. It was him, the stranger with the rifle. He stepped inside quickly and shut the door behind him, pressing his back against it. His breathing was controlled, steady, but his eyes darted toward the window. When he looked at me, there was no surprise, no hesitation. He simply nodded, like he'd expected me to be there. "You covered for me," he said quietly. I didn't answer. My throat was too dry. "That's dangerous," he added, checking the rifle slung across his chest. He moved with efficiency, checking the magazine, adjusting the strap, his motions silent and practiced. Finally, I managed to speak. "Who are they?" His eyes flicked up to mine. "People you don't want to meet." "That's not an answer." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "It's the only one you'll get." The tension in the shed was suffocating. Outside, the car engine purred, and I knew the men weren't leaving anytime soon. My hands clenched the handle of the toolbox, as if that could protect me. "They're still out there," I whispered. "I know," he said. His calmness unsettled me more than panic would have. He moved toward the back wall of the shed and slid a loose board aside, revealing a gap just big enough for a person to slip through. "You should leave. Go home. Forget this morning happened." But something in me snapped at his words. Forget? How was I supposed to forget standing in the crosshairs of his rifle? Or the way those men had looked at me like I was a loose thread in their plan? My voice rose, sharper than I intended. "You think I can just walk away? They'll come back. They'll ask again. And if they find out I lied?" He raised a hand, silencing me. "You're alive because they didn't think you mattered. Keep it that way." His tone wasn't cruel, but it was final. He slung the rifle tighter, preparing to slip into the field again. Desperation made me blurt the question that had been burning since I first saw him. Why point the rifle at me? For the first time, his expression faltered. A flicker of hesitation crossed his eyes, then vanished. Because I needed to know if you'd flinch. The words hung in the air, heavy and cryptic. Before I could press him, he was gone again, slipping through the gap in the wall and into the tall grass. I stared at the empty space, heart hammering, wondering what kind of man tested strangers that way. When I finally left the shed, the sedan was still there. The two men were smoking, their faces turned toward the road, distracted for the moment. I walked as casually as I could to my uncle's truck, loaded the toolbox into the back, and climbed into the driver's seat. My hands trembled on the wheel, but I forced the engine to roar to life. As I drove away, the image in the rearview mirror burned into me, two hunters waiting for prey, and a ghost with a rifle moving somewhere between us. I didn't know it yet, but I'd just stepped into their game. And games like theirs didn't end with winners. They ended with survivors. The road home felt longer than usual, each bend stretching endlessly as though the world itself wanted to trap me in that morning. My uncle's truck rattled over the gravel, the windows down to let in the warm breeze, but even the air felt heavy, pressing against my chest. I kept glancing in the mirrors, half expecting the black sedan to appear behind me, shadowing every turn. But the road stayed empty, just the occasional crow cutting across the horizon. I told myself to calm down, to breathe, to believe that I'd escaped the strange tension of the range. Yet no matter how many times I tried, my mind circled back to the man with the rifle. The way he'd looked at me. The way he'd said I didn't belong. And most of all, the way I'd lied for him without even understanding why. By the time I reached my uncle's place, the sun was higher, the day already hot. His house sat at the edge of town, a squat building with peeling paint and a porch that always smelled faintly of oil and gunpowder. He was in the workshop out back, hunched over a disassembled shotgun like a surgeon with his patient. The metallic clink of tools echoed across the yard. I parked the truck, climbed out, and for a moment just stood there, trying to decide whether to tell him everything. He was strict, not the kind of man who liked surprises, but he'd also drilled into me the importance of honesty. Hiding something from him felt like walking across thin ice. "You're late," he called out without looking up, wiping his hands on a rag. "Target's all set." "Yeah," I said, forcing my voice steady. "All done." He finally looked at me, his sharp gray eyes scanning my face like he was reading a manual. "Something happen?" The question made my throat tighten. I could tell him. I could dump the whole story on him right there, and maybe he'd know what to do. But the memory of the stranger's warning echoed again. "You never saw me." My uncle was a man of rules, and if I told him, he might go straight to the police. And if those men in the sedan were watching, it would drag both of us into something neither of us understood. So I shook my head. "No. Just hot out there." He grunted, turning back to the shotgun. "Get cleaned up. Lunch in an hour." Inside the house, I splashed water on my face and stared at myself in the bathroom mirror. My reflection looked the same, messy hair, tired eyes, sweat clinging to my neck, but I didn't feel the same. It was like the ground beneath me had shifted. I wanted to believe I could shake it off, that tomorrow would be normal again, but deep down I knew better. You don't stand in the sights of a rifle and just walk away unchanged. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the house made me sit up in bed, convinced the sedan had followed me after all. I dreamed of crosshairs, of shadows moving through fields, of faceless men whispering that I didn't belong. By morning, I was exhausted, my body moving on autopilot as I helped my uncle with chores around the yard. He noticed my sluggishness but said nothing. That was his way. He believed people solved their own problems, even if it took time. The second day after the range, I decided to walk into town. Maybe normalcy would reset me, a cup of coffee at the diner, a chat with familiar faces, something to remind me I wasn't stuck in some strange dream. The diner sat at the corner of Main Street. Its bell jingling as I pushed through the door. The smell of bacon and coffee hit me instantly, warm and grounding. I slid into a booth by the window, trying to settle. That's when I saw him. The stranger. He was seated in the far corner, back to the wall, eyes on the door. He wasn't holding the rifle this time, but even without it, he radiated the same sharp tension. He looked different in daylight, less like a ghost and more like a man, but the effect was no less jarring. Our eyes met across the diner, and for a second, I froze. My instinct screamed to look away, but something about his gaze pinned me there. Calm, controlled, assessing. Then, almost imperceptibly, He nodded. I couldn't tell if it was a thank you for covering for him or a warning to keep my distance. Either way, my stomach tightened. I looked down at the menu, pretending to study it, though I couldn't read a single word. The waitress came, poured my coffee, and asked what I wanted. My voice cracked as I ordered the usual. When she left, I risked another glance. He was gone. The corner booth was empty, the doorbell hadn't even jingled. A shiver crawled down my spine. How could a man disappear so quickly in plain sight? I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, that maybe I'd mistaken someone else for him. But deep down, I knew it wasn't a mistake. He was there, and he wanted me to know he was there. That realization made the coffee taste like ash. I paid quickly and left the diner, the sun glaring against the sidewalk. My eyes scanned every alley, every doorway, searching for him, but he was nowhere. By the time I reached my uncle's truck, my pulse was hammering again. As I pulled open the door, I noticed something that froze me solid. On the driver's seat, tucked neatly where I couldn't miss it, lay a single rifle cartridge. Shiny brass, untouched, deliberate. I picked it up with trembling fingers. It wasn't a threat, not exactly. It was a message. A reminder. And that's when I understood, I hadn't just stumbled into someone else's business. Someone had chosen me to be part of it. The cartridge sat in my palm like a piece of burning coal. I turned it over, the brass glinting in the sunlight, cold and perfect, and all I could think about was how deliberate it was. He hadn't left it by accident. It was placed where I couldn't miss it, where it would force me to pick it up and wonder. I slipped it into my pocket quickly, glancing around the street, but everything looked normal. People crossing, a dog barking from a porch, a kid riding his bike past the diner. Nothing unusual. And yet, I felt exposed, like eyes were on me. I climbed into the truck and shut the door, trying to steady my breathing, but my mind kept racing. Why me? Why had he singled me out with a warning, a test, and now this? The drive back to my uncle's felt unreal, as if the town itself was fading into the background, and I was drifting into some private stage set up for a play I didn't understand. When I pulled into the yard, my uncle was stacking lumber near the shed. He waved absently, too focused on his work to notice my trembling hands. I almost told him then, the words on the tip of my tongue, but something in me clamped shut. This wasn't just about me anymore. If I dragged him into it, I'd be making him a target too. The cartridge felt heavy in my pocket as I walked inside the house. All afternoon, I couldn't shake the sense of being watched. Every time I stepped outside, I scanned the road. The sedan didn't appear, but that didn't calm me. The absence was worse than their presence. By evening, I finally decided I couldn't stay trapped in silence. I took the cartridge from my pocket, laid it on my desk, and stared at it under the dim lamp. Then I pulled out my phone. My finger hovered over the keypad, scrolling past contacts. Who could I even call? The police? They'd ask why I hadn't reported it earlier. My uncle? He'd demand every detail and then storm into something that might kill him. Before I could decide, a vibration shook the phone in my hand. A text. No name, no number I recognized. Just 5 words, don't throw that cartridge away. My stomach flipped. My eyes darted to the window, half expecting a shadow to be there. Nothing but the quiet night beyond the glass. I typed back quickly, who is this? The screen stayed blank for a full minute, long enough to make me think there would be no reply. Then another message appeared, you already know. I put the phone down like it had burned me. My breathing came fast, shallow. He had my number. He knew where I lived. That meant he could be closer than I dared imagine. I thought of my uncle asleep in his chair downstairs, oblivious, and a rush of guilt hit me. I had dragged this into our home without meaning to. I typed again, fingers trembling, what do you want? This time, the reply came quicker, to make sure you're ready. Ready for what? My hand shook so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Another message arrived before I could type, they'll come back soon. When they do, stay quiet. Watch. Don't run. I stared at the words until they blurred. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the desk. My chest felt tight, my pulse hammering in my ears. I wanted to believe it was some elaborate prank, but the weight of the cartridge told me otherwise. The man with the rifle wasn't playing games. He was orchestrating something, and somehow I'd been pulled into the center of it. That night, I barely slept. Every sound in the house jolted me awake. When the floorboards creaked, I imagined footsteps. When the wind rattled the window, I pictured shadows slipping across the yard. By morning, my body ached with exhaustion, but I forced myself through the routine, helping my uncle, hauling wood, fixing a hinge on the barn door. I didn't dare mention the messages. Not yet. In the afternoon, my uncle sent me into town for supplies. I drove reluctantly, nerves coiled tight, but nothing unusual happened on the way. The hardware store was nearly empty, just the clerk at the counter and an old man flipping through a fishing magazine. I gathered the things on the list, paid, and headed back to the truck. That's when I saw it. Across the street, parked half a block down, was the black sedan. The same one from the range. Its windows were tinted, but I knew they were watching. My chest seized up. I climbed into the truck, gripping the wheel, but I didn't start the engine. I just sat there, staring at the reflection of the sedan in the side mirror. My phone buzzed. Another message lit the screen, "Don't panic. They're checking. Not for you. For me." The words made my blood run cold. He was still out there, close enough to see what I saw, close enough to know what I was doing. I looked around desperately, searching for him, but the street was calm. A couple walked their dog. A kid carried a basketball down the sidewalk. Normal life, untouched. And yet, behind that thin layer of ordinary, something dangerous pulsed. I started the truck and pulled away, forcing myself not to speed, though every instinct screamed to get as far from that sedan as possible. The mirror showed them waiting, unmoving, like patient predators. My phone buzzed again. "Good. You didn't run. Remember that." I tossed the phone onto the seat, gripping the wheel with both hands. Whatever this was, it was tightening around me like a noose. The man with the rifle hadn't just entered my life by accident. He was testing me, shaping me, and I didn't even know for what. By the time I reached home, my hands were shaking again. My uncle asked why I looked pale, but I brushed it off, muttering about the heat. Inside my pocket, the cartridge pressed against my leg like a reminder, a promise, maybe even a countdown. The days that followed stretched tight, like a rope pulled to the breaking point. Every morning I woke up expecting to see that black sedan outside, and every night I went to sleep wondering if it was parked somewhere nearby, lights off, engines silent, men inside waiting. My uncle carried on as usual, his world full of tools, chores, and the steady rhythm of small-town life. I envied him. He didn't notice the way my eyes darted at every sound, or if he did, he chalked it up to fatigue. But I knew the truth, something was circling me, and the man with the rifle wasn't letting me escape it. It happened on a Wednesday. I was repairing a cracked fence post along the edge of the property when I heard the low growl of an engine pulling up the road. Dust rose in the air. My chest clenched as the familiar shape of the black sedan appeared, rolling to a stop right by the gate. This time they didn't just sit inside. Both doors opened, and the two men stepped out, suits pressed, movements crisp, eyes scanning the yard like it belonged to them. I set down the hammer slowly, trying to act calm, though my pulse was racing. One of them, taller with slicked back hair, raised a hand in a casual wave that didn't match the sharpness in his eyes. "Afternoon," he called, walking closer. My uncle emerged from the workshop, wiping his hands on a rag. He looked at them, then at me, suspicion creasing his face. "What do you want?" he asked flatly. The tall one smiled thinly. "Just a word with your nephew. Won't take long." My uncle's jaw tightened. "Anything you have to say, you can say with me here." The second man, shorter but stockier, stepped forward, his smile colder. "We're not here to cause trouble. We're looking for someone. Thought maybe your boy had seen him at the range the other morning." His eyes flicked to me, sharp and measuring. "Tall man, dark jacket, carries a rifle. Ring a bell?" My throat went dry. The memory of the rifle aimed at me, the whispered warning, the messages, it all pressed down at once. I forced my face into a blank mask and shook my head. "Haven't seen anyone like that." The tall one studied me for a long, silent beat. His smile never faltered, but his eyes were knives. "You sure?" "He said he hasn't," my uncle cut in, stepping closer, his stance protective. "Now unless you've got a warrant or a badge, I suggest you leave." The shorter man chuckled, low and humorless. "No need to get hostile, old man. We're just asking questions." The tall one finally raised his hands in mock surrender. "All right. No harm done." He glanced at me once more, a look that lingered too long, before turning back to the sedan. The two of them climbed inside, doors shutting with a solid thud. The car didn't leave immediately. It sat there, idling, the tinted windows reflecting the afternoon sun. Then, slowly, it rolled down the road, disappearing in a haze of dust. My uncle turned on me the second they were gone. "Who the hell are those men, and why are they sniffing around you?" I hesitated, my mind scrambling for an answer that wouldn't drag him into the mess. I don't know. They've been at the range before. Maybe they think I saw something I didn't. He narrowed his eyes, clearly unconvinced. You're hiding something. I'm not, I lied, my voice too quick, too defensive. His frown deepened, but he didn't push. Instead, he muttered something under his breath and went back to the workshop, slamming the door harder than usual. I stood there in the yard, sweat dripping down my back, heart pounding. The men knew where I lived now. They had looked me in the eyes and tested me. And I'd lied again, just as I had before. The weight of it pressed heavier with each passing hour. That night, I sat in my room staring at the cartridge on my desk, turning it between my fingers. My phone buzzed. A new message lit the screen. You handled it well. They don't trust you yet, but they don't know. Stay steady. I gritted my teeth, typing furiously, why are you doing this to me? The reply came almost instantly, because you don't flinch. I stared at the words, my chest heaving. That single phrase again, circling back, haunting me. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, to scream that I never asked for this. But another message appeared before I could. They'll come back. When they do, you'll have a choice. Pick right, and you'll live. Pick wrong? The text ended there, unfinished but heavy with threat. My hands trembled. I set the phone down, pressing my palms into my face. The man with the rifle wasn't just testing me anymore. He was dragging me into a war I didn't understand, a game between hunters where I was becoming bait. Out in the yard, the night was quiet, but I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, in the darkness beyond the trees, he was watching. Waiting to see what I'd do next. The next 2 days crawled by like years, every hour stretched thin with nerves. I couldn't shake the sound of those men's voices or the way their eyes had dug into me. My uncle carried on with his usual stubborn rhythm, but I caught him watching me sometimes, suspicion in his gaze. He knew something was wrong, but I still couldn't bring myself to tell him. The moment I did, he'd take control, and something in my gut screamed that would only make things worse. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, too afraid to jump but too close to step back. On the third night, the test came. I woke to the distant crunch of gravel under tires. My room was dark, the faint glow of the moon barely outlining the furniture. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamed it. Then I heard doors shutting, low voices murmuring outside. My blood turned to ice. They were back. I slipped from bed, heart hammering, and crept to the window. The black sedan was parked at the gate, headlights off. Both men stood by the hood, their silhouettes sharp against the pale light. They weren't in a hurry this time. They moved with quiet purpose, like predators certain their prey was cornered. One of them pointed toward the house. My stomach dropped. Before I could react, my phone buzzed on the desk. I grabbed it, shielding the glow from the window. A message waited, don't move. Don't speak. Watch. I clenched my teeth, my pulse slamming in my ears. Through the glass, I saw the taller man reach inside his jacket. He pulled something out, not a gun, but a flashlight, and flicked it on. The beam cut across the yard, sweeping over the porch, the barn, the fence. My uncle's dog started barking furiously in its kennel, the sound tearing through the night. My uncle's window light flicked on. The men froze for a second, then exchanged a look. The taller one motioned sharply, and they both slipped back toward the sedan. My uncle stormed out onto the porch in his boots, shotgun in hand, shouting into the night. Who's there? You're trespassing on private property. The sedan's engine roared to life. Gravel sprayed as they spun the car around and tore down the road, their taillights vanishing into the dark. My uncle stood there, scanning the shadows, cursing under his breath. When the yard finally fell silent, he went back inside, still muttering. I stayed at the window, trembling, the phone clenched in my fist. Another message buzzed, see? They're not here for him. They're here for me. And you're the thread between us. My throat tightened. I typed quickly, why me? I didn't ask for this. The reply came after a pause, because sometimes survival chooses you. Not the other way around. I wanted to throw the phone, to scream at him to leave me alone, but I didn't. Because part of me knew he was right. I hadn't chosen this, but I was tangled in it all the same. The following day, my uncle grilled me about what I'd seen. I lied again, saying it was just some drunks messing around on the road. He didn't believe me, not fully, but he let it drop, maybe out of exhaustion or maybe because he was waiting for me to come clean. I wished I could. The weight of silence gnawed at me, heavier every hour. That afternoon, while hauling feed sacks to the barn, I saw movement at the tree line. A flicker of shadow, a brief glint of sunlight off metal. My stomach dropped. He was there, the stranger, watching. I froze mid-step, gripping the sack, unsure if I should call out. Before I could decide, my phone buzzed. Not now. Too exposed. Midnight. Old water tower. Come alone. The message chilled me to the bone. Midnight. Alone. Every instinct screamed that meeting him was insane. And yet, I knew I couldn't ignore it. If I stayed silent, I'd be crushed between him and the men in the sedan until one of them decided I was no longer useful. That night, I waited until my uncle's snores echoed through the house. I slipped on my jacket, pocketed the cartridge, and crept outside. The air was sharp, cool, every sound magnified. The old water tower stood half a mile down the road, its rusted frame cutting a skeleton against the moonlit sky. When I arrived, the place looked deserted. The wind rattled the metal ladder, and weeds whispered at the base. I almost turned back, but then a voice drifted from the shadows. You came. He stepped out, the rifle slung across his back, his eyes gleaming under the moon. Calm, steady, unshakable. You left this on my truck, I snapped, pulling the cartridge from my pocket. You've been dragging me into something I don't want. He studied me, then nodded once. Good. Anger's better than fear. Means you're ready to listen. I don't want to listen, I hissed. I want you out of my life. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. You don't understand. Those men, they're not after you. They're after me. And if you don't learn what's coming, you'll be crushed in the crossfire. His words hung heavy in the night, and though I wanted to deny them, deep down I knew they were true. The rope had pulled too tight. There was no walking away. The wind moaned through the old water tower, the steel beams groaning like an old ship at sea. He stood only a few feet from me, the rifle across his back glinting faintly in the moonlight. My pulse hammered against my ribs, but my feet stayed rooted. Something in his eyes, calm yet scarred, told me this wasn't a man bluffing for power. He was carrying weight, the kind that left no room for games. You want answers, he said finally, his voice low but steady. So I'll give you some. But once you hear them, there's no going back. I swallowed hard, my grip tight on the cartridge in my palm. Then start talking. Who are you? He tilted his head slightly, as if deciding how much truth I could handle. Then he said, my name doesn't matter. Names get people killed. But years ago, before you were fixing targets out here, I was part of something, a unit that never officially existed. We were ghosts, sent into places no one wanted to admit existed. Our job was to erase problems before they grew. His tone was flat, but behind it I could feel the weight of memories he didn't want. We did things, he continued, things you don't put in reports, things that eat at a man's soul. When the missions ended, we were cut loose. No parades, no medals. Just shadows carrying scars. I stared at him, my throat dry. And those men in the car? They're from your past. He gave a grim smile. From deeper than my past. They work for people who profit from silence. They know what I know. That makes me a liability. And if they think I've passed anything to you, then you're one too. The words landed like a hammer. Suddenly the black sedan, the late-night whispers, the strange messages, it all clicked together in a way I didn't want it to. My chest tightened, and I blurted, I didn't ask for this. I'm not part of your war. His gaze sharpened, almost pitying. You think war cares if you ask? Survival doesn't give you a choice. You're standing in the storm whether you like it or not. The only question is whether you drown or learn to walk through it. I shook my head, anger and fear tangling in my gut. Why me? Out of everyone, why leave that cartridge on my truck? Why drag me in? He took a step closer, his voice dropping into something sharper. Because you didn't look away. You saw me fixing targets, and instead of running or calling someone, you stayed. You watched. That means something. Most people are blind until it's too late. You're not. I didn't know whether to take that as an insult or a twisted compliment. My hand tightened around the cartridge, the cold brass biting my skin. What do you expect me to do? I don't even know how to. Survive, he interrupted. That's all. Survive long enough until I finish what needs finishing. They're circling closer every day. The fact they showed up at your uncle's gate means they're probing for weakness. Next time, they won't just drive away. The night seemed to close in tighter around us. Crickets hushed, the trees stood still, as if even nature was listening. My stomach turned. If they come back, my uncle could be. He's already a target by association, the man said flatly. That's why I'm telling you this now. You need to be ready. There won't be warnings. I took a shaky breath, the reality sinking in like a knife. My life, quiet mornings fixing targets, evenings hauling feed, days that blurred together with nothing but sweat and silence, that life had already been stripped away. The rifle across his back wasn't just a weapon, it was a line drawn in the dirt. Step across, and everything changed. Stay back, and I'd be crushed when the storm hit. I finally asked the question that had been gnawing at me. What happens if I walk away right now? He looked at me long, hard, then said, they'll find you anyway. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week. But they'll come. Because now they believe you've seen too much. And in their world, belief is enough for a bullet. Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. My mind screamed to run, to hide, to deny every word he'd said. But in my gut, deep down where instinct ruled, I already knew he was right. I'd felt it the night the sedan idled at our gate, in the way those men looked at me like I was already marked. He reached into his jacket and pulled out something small, setting it on the ground between us. A folded piece of paper. When the time comes, follow this. It's not instructions, not exactly. Just a path. You'll understand when you need to. I stared at the paper, the moonlight silvering its edges, as if it carried more weight than the rifle on his back. My hand shook as I picked it up, slipping it into my pocket. When I looked up, he was already moving back into the trees, vanishing into the shadows as easily as stepping through a door. His voice drifted one last time, low and steady, don't wait for choice. It won't come. And then he was gone. The night swallowed him whole, leaving me standing alone under the rusted skeleton of the tower, the cartridge in one hand and the folded paper burning against my chest in the other. For the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't just fixing targets anymore. I was one that the folded paper felt heavier with each passing day, like it was a stone sewn into my pocket. I never opened it. Not once. Part of me was afraid of what I might find inside, and part of me wanted to pretend life could go back to normal. But normal had already died the night he walked away into the shadows. My uncle noticed I was restless, pacing, jumping at every car that slowed near the ranch. He asked questions I couldn't answer, so I mumbled about headaches, about being tired. He didn't push. Maybe he knew. Maybe he saw the change in my eyes before I did. It was 3 nights later when the storm broke. I heard the crunch of tires on gravel at an hour when no one should be driving down our road. My uncle was asleep in his room, the soft hum of the old box fan covering the noise. I slipped to the window, my chest tightening. Headlights cut across the field, then snapped off. The same black sedan. I froze, every instinct screaming danger, but my legs moved anyway, carrying me toward the door as if pulled by invisible hands. When I stepped onto the porch, the night was knife quiet. 3 figures emerged from the dark, their shapes solid, movements precise. One of them called out softly, "We don't want trouble. Just the paper." His voice was calm, but I felt the lie in it. They weren't here for words. They were here to finish something. My mind flashed to the folded sheet in my pocket. My hand brushed it, but I didn't move to pull it out. Instead, I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." My voice cracked, betraying fear. The tallest figure stepped closer, the outline of something metallic in his hand catching the faint light. "We know he left it with you. Don't make this harder than it has to be." That was when a sound split the night, sharp, clean, unmistakable. A rifle being chambered. From the tree line behind them, a voice I recognized cut through the air. He said no. The men froze. My pulse spiked so high I thought I might black out. Out of the shadows stepped the same man from the tower, his rifle steady against his shoulder. The moon caught his face, calm as stone, eyes locked on the 3 figures like a wolf sighting prey. The leader raised his hands slowly, signaling the others to hold. "This doesn't have to end messy," he said. "Hand him over. Hand the paper over. We walk away." The man with the rifle gave a cold, humorless smile. "You don't walk away from this. Not tonight." Everything exploded at once. A flash, a crack, the rifle barked, and one of the men dropped, screaming as he clutched his leg. The other 2 scattered, returning fire. Bullets hissed past, striking the porch post beside me, splinters flying into my face. My body moved on instinct. I dove flat, the cartridge in my fist digging into my palm like an anchor to reality. The firefight was a blur of thunder and shadows. The man with the rifle moved like smoke, vanishing, reappearing, every shot precise. The attackers fired blindly, desperate. One of them circled toward the house, and I realized with horror he was angling for my uncle's room. Something broke loose inside me. I wasn't trained, I wasn't armed, but I wasn't going to let my uncle die in his bed. I leapt from the porch, tackling the man mid-sprint. We hit the ground hard, the gun in his hand skittering away into the dirt. He snarled, swinging a fist that split my lip, but adrenaline drowned the pain. My hands clawed at him, my knee driving into his ribs. A shot cracked again, not mine, not his. He went limp beneath me, the life leaving his body in an instant. I staggered back, trembling, as the man with the rifle stepped into view. Smoke curled from his barrel. His eyes met mine briefly, not with comfort, not with praise, just with the cold recognition that survival had demanded another line be crossed. The last attacker fled into the dark, crashing through brush, his footsteps fading into silence. Then the night was still again, broken only by my ragged breathing and the groans of the man bleeding on the dirt where he'd fallen first. The rifleman lowered his weapon, scanning the field before finally letting his shoulders ease. He walked to me, his boots crunching softly, and crouched low. "Now you understand," he said quietly. "This is what it means to be marked." I shook my head, tears burning at the corners of my eyes. "I didn't ask for this." "No one does," he replied. "But you didn't run. You fought. That matters." For the first time since meeting him, I felt the edges of his words soften, just slightly. He reached into his jacket, pulling a small lighter from his pocket. "The paper," he said. My trembling hand fished it out, passing it to him like it was burning already. He unfolded it, glanced once, then flicked the lighter, watching the flame eat the words until nothing but ash drifted to the dirt. "Why burn it?" I asked, breathless. "Because what matters isn't written down," he said. "It's in you now. And that makes you dangerous to them. Which means they'll keep coming. You have two choices: pretend this never happened and wait for the next knock, or come with me and learn how to finish it." I stared at him, the weight of the night pressing into my chest. Behind me, the ranch was still standing. My uncle still slept, unaware of the battle fought outside his window. But I knew when he woke, nothing would be the same. Nothing could be. The man turned, starting toward the trees. He didn't look back when he said, "Decide fast. The storm doesn't wait." My fingers tightened around the spent cartridge in my palm. It was warm now, not from fire, but from my grip, from the choice I hadn't yet spoken but already knew was mine. With a final glance at the house, I stepped off the porch and followed him into the dark. For the first time, I wasn't just fixing targets. I was becoming one. The end.